Now, what is our ask? You can wear two sets of shoes. You can wear the banker's shoes, and as a banker, your take is, hey guys, are you guys going to pay me back? I've lent you close to about $3 billion, and is there a chance that you're going to blow up and leave me with a hole in my balance sheet, or is there a chance that you'll pay me back? So that's one set. That's one set of shoes, and you have to wear those shoes to examine GEMS from a different lens. You also need to wear a pair of shoes from GEMS perspective, from GEMS point of view. So if you are the ownership team, if you're the management team at GEMS, what are you seeing? What are you looking at? What are you valuing? What are you thinking? How much cash do you need? Is the existing business enough? Is it generating sufficient cash for you to pay off what you've borrowed? Do you plan to pay off what you've borrowed, right? So that's the second pair of shoes, and that's the second lens. Then there's a third lens, and that lens is of CVC. CVC is a private equity partner. They've looked at it from a valuation perspective, from a growth perspective, from an investment perspective. What is CVC saying? What are they seeing? Everybody else in the market saying CVC is overpaid for this transaction and this deal, but what is CVC thinking? What are the assumptions CVCs use for their analysis, right? So that's the third pair of lens. So you've got three separate point of views, three separate perspectives. Bankers, very conservative, very safe, primarily concerned with getting paid back. Founders, owners, and management, concerned with, how much cash do we need? These are hard times. We don't want to be sort of caught on the short end, when the market tanks or disappears, or it becomes difficult or next to impossible for us to borrow or lend. And then finally, the acquirers, the investors, which is CVC, right? These are the three lenses, these are the three shades, three perspectives, 3 point of views we want to look at GEMS from. Okay, fair enough? Now, one thing that is there in GEMS that was not there in Maya's case, right, is that we have a fairly detailed debt schedule. We have a fairly detailed fixed asset schedule. So we've got two more things in terms of complexity that we've added, that we've introduced. I wasn't there before. That's one. I think the second thing is, from a modeling point of view, we have a couple of choices. We actually have multiple choices. When it comes to what do you think, in your mind, in your opinion, if you were to model a school, how do you think, which model do you think is the most appropriate? Where would you start? So, online sales were easy, right? You said impressions, click-through rates, clicks, conversions, orders, ticket size. I've got my top line revenue. Well, how would that work for a school or a school system? What do you think? Where should we start? Where would you start? If you were to start modeling revenues for GEMS, where would you start? Now, the reason why I'm asking this question is, think about this for a second. Online store. You run an online store and it's physical goods. You run an online store and it's digital goods. From a top line modeling point of view, from a revenue modeling point of view, right? What are your drivers? Your drivers are impressions, CTR, which is your click-through rate, which leads to clicks, which leads to orders, which leads to ticket size, which leads to sales. Now I sell digital goods. Same model works, right? Impressions, CTR, clicks, orders, ticket size, and sales. Yes? This makes sense? How about a retail store? I'm no longer running an online, so I actually run a physical store, retail store. and I sell physical goods in that retail store. How would you model this in terms of revenues? How would you extend the framework? For physical goods, you start off with, say, footfall, and then share of traffic. So, you know, let's say you're in a mall or on Tariq Road or on a main street. So what's the footfall? What's the flow of traffic that flows through that location or that venue? What is your share of traffic? And then what is the conversion? Which leads to orders? What's your ticket size? And sales. Right? So you can see that, right? This is a trend. You're seeing this trend. Okay. Now, let's think in terms of a school system. So school system, as most of you have now figured out, is essentially number of schools, and each school has a number of students, and each student pays a fee based on a fee structure, and they pay it every year. Now they may pay it every month, every year, or they may pay it, you know, once a month for 12 months in a year, or they might pay it for 6 months or 8 months for a term in a year, right? But that variation will go up and down, come up and down. Okay. How about services? You run a services company. You sell technology services, right? And you're selling services, so no goods are involved. How does the revenue model work now? What do you do now? So one approach is, you know, you come from the top approach, which is, you know, I work in this space and people generate X billions of dollars of revenues. The other part is, how many people do I have? So let's say I sell design services, right? I am a designer. I do design consults. So if I do design consults, I have a certain number of designers on my payroll, which is essentially my team, and the utilization of their team and the hourly rate for that team, right? And that gives me a sense. So let's say if I have 10 people and I charge $30 an hour for their time. So then the math would be, if I have 10 people, if my staff is 10, if I charge $30 per hour for their time, and let's say I can bill about 100 hours a month in total, then my monthly revenue for this team is going to be this much, right? So I can bill about $30,000 a month, as long as, you know, all of this holds, right? So this is my staff, this is my team, this is my rate, and this is my utilization. Does that make sense? If you run a hospital system, right, or a clinic, how does that work? How do you model revenues for that? Yes, it's a services business, but rather than design consults, what do you have? You have physicians. And again, the model becomes teams, utilization, and hourly rate. But hospitals are different, because, you know, what you're saying is you've got actually a long list of services. You actually have a funnel, and from a funnel point of view, you've got physicians, but physicians then do referrals. They do referrals for tests and labs, and we make money on that as hospitals. They do referrals to other specialists. We make money on that. They make referrals to surgeons, which is where we make the most money, right? So this is, you know, there is a margin here, there's a margin here, and there's a margin here. And you need to model this. So if you're building a physical model, if you're building a financial model for a hospital, what you're really looking at is this gentleman, the person who's the original essential touch point for a patient, right? He has a rate. So so you model revenues for him on the same teams, utilization, hourly rate basis. But the real money is not here. The real money is in referrals. So your funnel will feed patients to physicians, but the hospital will only make money if the physicians do referrals. If the physicians don't do referrals, then the hospital will not make money, will not be profitable. School is very similar to a hospital. So there's a student and teacher, right? And that is part. The referrals are extracurriculars. The referrals are charges for books, for uniforms, for activities. The referrals are for remedial studies. Referrals are for SAT prep and GMAT prep, right? Think of it that model, right? In GEM's case, though, we're not making it that complicated. In GEM's case, we're saying if you really want to build a school system, this is the model you're going to work with, which is the hospital model. But essentially, what you're really looking at is some combo of a services company and a hospital. Generally, from my perspective, when I build models, I prefer to start from a bottoms-up approach. And the reason why I start from a bottom-up approach is a bottom-up approach forces you to think in terms of resources, cost of those resources, and utilization. When you come from the top-down approach, right, the top-down approach is only there as a cross-check and a calibration. So, for example, if I say I will hire 100,000 consultants over the next 5 years in my design services company, my first question to you would be, do we produce 100,000 students in the design space that we can hire? Do we produce 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 design students, right? That's a common question, right? So what is the capacity of the industry to serve, of academia to serve it? I think the second question that comes up there is that it's from my perspective, from my point of view, I sometimes feel that saying that I'm going to take 1% of the addressable market from a modeling point of view is bad design. You can build the bottom-up model and then say, look, we're only touching only 1% of the addressable market. So you can use it as a calibration. But from a modeling perspective, using 1% of addressable market, I think is bad design. But that's just me for now. Design determines how you structure the model, how you create the model, how you craft it. Design also forces you to ask, why are we doing this? What's the objective? So with GEMS, remember, there are 3 clear-cut objectives, right? The first objective is, as the lender, as the bank, what do we see? As the lender, as the bank, we want to be paid back. That's all we're concerned. We're not concerned about growth. We're not concerned about profitability. We're concerned about, will we get repaid? And to some extent, will we get repaid is linked to growth and profitability, but we're not interested in the upside because you will not benefit from the upside. We've lent them $1 billion, we'll get paid back $1 billion. That's it. We won't get paid $2 billion just because GEM's worth a lot more. It'll help us to get repaid if GEM's worth a lot more, but from our perspective, we're only concerned on the downside. What's the chance? What's the probability? What's the indication that we won't get paid? Okay, so that's one. Second question is from a shareholder's point of view, right? GEM's asking themselves, are we going to run out of cash? So in one sense, the big takeaway from the GEM's case is going to be the statement of cash flows. How do we answer the statement of cash question? So that's the second big objective from GEM's point of view, from GEM's shareholders and management point of view. Then there's a third lens, and that's the length of an acquirer. What is GEM's going to be worth in the long run? Dubai's outlook, economic outlook, regional outlook, utilization and growth in school systems. So that is of real interest to CVC, the acquirer. We've paid $1 billion to take 25% of these guys at a $4 billion valuation. Is it worth $4 billion? Is it worth more? or is it worth less? And that is the valuation question. So you've got three questions. You've got the survival question. Will GEM survive? Survival question is being asked by the banks. You got the cash question. How much cash do we need? The cash question is being asked by GEM's management. You've got the valuation question, and that's the question that's being asked by the investors. What we're trying to do, what we'll try to do, is try and answer these three questions